We started early. We started early just because we were all set to go. So Mark, you're up to give your budget overview.
No, we're just starting, so just got the number.
Nothing wrong with the historic 1955 bridge that was beat up by the flood.
Shows the resilience, Mayor.
Mayor, do you want me to take roll call?
Yeah, well, now just you can see it. You don't have to
just
call it.
Okay,
I just want to get started. There's no reason to wait.
you got it.
All right, Mark, the floor is yours.
Okay.
Mark,
All right.
the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, members of council. What we wanted to do today is go over the kind of the methodology of how the budget is put together, provide a little background of the structure of the budget, structure of our accounts, etc., and go through some of the bigger items that are impacting the 2025 budget. Okay, so to start, for those of you, and I apologize, as I'm sure many of you know this already, but we do have a chart of accounts for the city. Typically, other municipalities, other organizations, businesses have a chart of accounts. It basically tells you, is an account an asset? Is it a revenue? Is it a liability? Is it an expense, et cetera, et cetera. So we currently have about 1,100 accounts that are shared across various departments. We have about 40 departments, and then also about 20 funds that are active. Okay, so that combination, if you think about the permutations of how many you could have, it's kind of mind-numbing. Fortunately, we only have probably about 2,000 different accounts that we use on a regular basis. Okay, so just to provide that. I also provided a chart of accounts, so I do have a packet here for you. I can also email it if you'd like. That shows the basically the funds that I mentioned, as well as the departments. Again, the accounts, 1,000 of them, probably a few too many to really print out, but I'm happy to do so if you'd like to see those. Okay. As far as our budget,
let's slow down. Just
okay.
You'll email us this.
Sure, I can
Okay.
email it.
Yeah.
Yep.
so some of the funds. I know it's on. If you go back to that page,
Sure.
it is sideways here.
Wouldn't fit otherwise.
But the 101 fund is our operating budget, and that's what we always discuss. Then the other funds, you are somewhat restricted in how we manage those funds. So I just want to point that out. And so as you look through your budget, you can match up the funds on this page, this table, if you will, and with your budget. So I just want to make sure we point that out slowly here. I don't know if this is awkward, but I don't think there's.
Well, yeah, I wasn't quite sure how to best. I guess I could have cut up the departments and laid those out separately.
Yeah, so the funds are on the left and the departments are on the right.
Sure, they're on the top and the bottom.
Oh, yeah. That's really awkward.
Okay.
That was awkward.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. I'll fix that when I send council the presentation. I'll cut up the departments and kind of turn it all the other way. Okay. As far as our budgeting methodology, what we have typically used is basically a looking back view. So we look at what our actuals, the results are for prior years. We go back 3, 4, maybe even 5 years, and then we also look forward and we discuss with our directors what sort of trends they're seeing. We talk to our tax collectors, so be it Berkheimer or Keystone. We also talk to Portnoy. They are our collections agency for delinquent accounts, utility billing, real estate taxes, etc. And then we also talk to our sister cities, our third-class cities. We meet with them once a quarter, give or take.
Yep.
But we do trade ideas as we're going through budgets. I know during COVID there was a lot of discussion about what sort of revenue trends we were seeing, what was going to dip, what was staying the same, etc. And in short, we really do a line item budget. So again, we look at the historicals and compare those and look forward. Just a general comment on expenses and some of the more general expenses, such as pension payments and accrued sick time and vacation time. Those are spread because well, we'd like to share, I guess, share the cost across all departments, specifically for things like pension payments and for things like the terminal payout. So when somebody retires, they leave, they get any accrued sick or vacation time. We don't know necessarily which department that's going to hit. So we spread that across all the departments based on headcount. So as you go through the budget, you'll see that, that each department does have those allocations. In addition, one thing I didn't note here was the sewer fund. That was created, I believe, about 3 years ago now. It was something that in our discussions with Standard & Poor's, they couldn't recommend, but in essence, they recommended that we create a special sewer fund that is separate from the sewer operation or the sewer facility. This is just our underground sewer lines within the city. Okay, so we allocate, again, that's another allocation. We take expenses from the department and we allocate that to the sewer fund. And that's the 808 fund. Thank you.
Mark?
Yes.
Just a quick question. Is there a way that you could provide us with the information of where, when you're talking about those funds that get spread across the departments? I've always been very uncomfortable with that because I don't know where they go. And I understand, 1 year it might be high here, here low
Yep.
there, but it just seems like we should have some idea of how those trends are per department. And I'm just wondering if that type of data are available.
The problem with that is that by October 1st, we don't know who's gonna retire. We don't know who's leaving next year, the following year.
But I think
That's probably why they just spread it across.
But I mean, historically.
historical, sure. We can say when the mayor's assistant left, we could, we would see obviously that spike when police officers or firefighters leave. We'll see those payouts. So sure, we can.
I guess
yep.
what I'm asking is when an expense comes up, it's not just thrown into whatever department and it's taken out, and we have no idea where that expense came from.
You're right.
Well, actually,
Well,
no, the expense does go to the department which incurred it. So say the budget may be well understated in that particular department because say there are only 2 or 3 people in that department for terminal leave.
Right.
So somebody leaves and they get paid out much more. Now the offset is then taking money from all the other departments and making that department whole. So we would do a budget transfer, basically move that money around to make sure that we're not over
But the
budget.
expense is credited to that particular department.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay.
but the downside is that it appears that then we under budgeted significantly, because that's come up by council several times.
Yeah.
And it's the accounting that we've been utilizing it. I mean, it's the practice that we've had. So changing it right now could just distort the history when we look at the budget.
Yeah.
Something we can talk about.
Yep. Okay, I believe several members of council have seen something similar to this in the past. It's our basically top 25 revenue streams coming into the general fund. I did also note the percentage of the total budget.
It's more than property tax.
Yeah, I did note the percentage of the total budget, the estimated or the budget, the proposed budget for 2025. The timing of those inflows, so is that something that comes in once a year? Does it come in every week, et cetera, et cetera? Did provide some notes there. Things like interest, I excluded any fund balances that were used or that we plan to use, also excluded because those are not really revenue sources. And then, as I noted before, the sewer fund, because we carved that all out, including the revenues, I didn't include that, but that would be a big part of our general fund revenues as the general fund stands now. But again, that gets carved out and moved out into its own fund each month.
One of the, this is for Frank, Crystal's not here, but oh, excuse me, okay, she's on the phone. One of the things, why this is important is because the revenue is not linear. It doesn't all come in every month, all the same amount. It goes, it's up and down. And some time back, Dr. Rugos asked for this chart. So we're just reminding you of that. It may pop up during the budget hearings. It usually would come up actually when we review the monthly reports. And that's where this report is relevant, but I think it's just good overview. I mean, we're skimming everything, and we can then definitely have one-on-one conversations, because there's a lot in this budget. Even if you've been here for a while, there's some nuances in here that, unless you're asking us questions, you may not know. But I just want to mention that. So go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, now the next several slides are I would say an eye chart probably to read. I will email this again to everyone, but I just wanted to provide council, again, you can read this at your leisure, provide council with the behind the scenes, I guess, portions of, or the explanation, yes, of the non-resident EIT pension portion that is being removed in the 2025 budget. So again, these two slides provide the background on that. You're welcome to read through it. We can talk about it afterwards, but I know they're...
Well, Mark, just give them a snapshot.
Yeah,
What that going to look like as far as the ones that we're going to capture.
Yep. So I do have that on the third slide here. So what does it all mean, right? So short kind of summary. So once our aggregated pension plans achieved a funding level of 70%, the state dictates that we can't use the additional non-resident EIT pension allocation or tax for to then use that to fund the pension. Okay, so in other words,
Interesting though, as a home rules center, we can raise the EIT. So we could raise the EIT and say that this is going to pension to get us to 95%, but we can't use Act 205 for the commuter tax. But we could raise it. We just have to make sure we raise it for all people, not just residents, non-residents, because that's what we did originally. We were going to raise it, and we had to make it 1.95 for everybody.
okay.
So
So-
the 70%
Yes.
funding, is that all the funds, or is that a fund?
That is the aggregated pension plan. Well, actually, it includes PMRS, but that one is nearly at 100% anyway. So it's all the
mostly
pension
police and
plans,
fire.
police and fire.
And
exactly.
70%, the Act 205 should never put it at 70%. They should have allowed us to commuter tax until we got to like 90%. 75%, 70% is not, I don't consider funded.
Well, we have a bad couple months in the economy, we drop below 70, then you gotta reenact it, and people are gonna go nuts.
Dr. Ruggles, we are going to submit the updated actuarial study. We did provide that study, which came out about a week or so ago, to the unions, because they requested it as part of the negotiations. So we'll submit that, and then we can talk about it a little bit in more detail. But essentially, because the funding levels increased, and this is, I would say, mostly due to the markets and the performance of the fund, propelled the funding level above 70%. So for both fire and police specifically, they've increased just above that threshold. Now they're aggregated. Act 205 allows us to do that. So you have that detail in this slide here. It explains a little bit more of the background. So we put those together, but then together they're above 70%. And then you'll be able, when we send you the actual actuarial study, you'll see the assumptions, the underlying assumptions behind behind the actual funding.
So when we pull this $1.9 million out, that basically helped to satisfy our MMO, correct?
That's right.
And so we have to replace it from our general budget in order to meet our MMO.
Not quite.
So let's explain. Why doesn't Mark explain what happened
Okay.
in general terms, and we can revisit this at another date too, because this is kind of meaty stuff, and I'd rather give you guys something to look at, and then we can read through it and then talk about it maybe before our or at the budget meeting when we talk about the EIT. But go ahead, Mark, if that's
Sure.
okay.
No, that's fine. So, Dr. Rugos, to answer your question, so with the funding level improving in the pensions, our MMO actually dropped. So the third bullet point here notes that our MMO went down, I'd say minimally 1.5 million. And I say minimally because we hadn't done, if the pension plan hadn't performed as well as it did, the funding level would be below 70%, and we probably would have paid more than 1.5 million, or we would have paid additional money in the MMO going forward, as opposed to having it drop. So yes, we lost 1.9 million in EIT pension, non-resident EIT pension revenue, but our MMO went down by $1.5 million. So that gap is much smaller than you would think initially.
Mark, are we still using the 0.5%, the 1% we're splitting with the district, that 0.5% that we're keeping, is that still going?
Correct. So that is bullet point number.
Before you go there, so the, if the funding level was kept, if it was stayed at under 70, we actually would have had to pay more than what Mark just explained. So this budget probably wouldn't have been the same budget. It would have been about $200,000, maybe $500,000. How much was it?
Yeah, I could. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, okay.
Because we don't know.
It was anywhere from a $200,000 to maybe $500,000 or greater that would have had to additionally go to the MMO. But as a result of the funding level change, the requirement was reduced. So therefore, the delta was reduced. We'll send you this information. We can sit down with you guys in a little bit and draw it up on the board if you'd like to do it one-on-one.
Okay, and then going back to Councilman Pinnabone's question, so the EIT tax is at 1.95%. Okay, so we know now because of the funding level hitting 70, the 0.95 goes away. So we now have the 1%. So the 1% is typically split between the school district and the municipality. So Easton, we get 0.5%, and then the school district would get 0.5%. Now, in the area, many other municipalities do collect an EIT as well, right? So we, the city of Easton, can only take the 0.5% that's not being collected by any of the other municipalities. So in reviewing this with Keystone, our EIT collector, they estimated that the positive impact, so basically of the 0.5% that we get to keep, that's going to bring in an additional $500,000, or that's going to bring in $500,000 for 2025. So that more or less covers the gap that we had between the drop in the non-resident EIT, the 1.95, in revenue, so the loss of revenue there. We then had a decrease in the expense of the MMO, but our non-resident EIT that is not going to the pension is $500,000. So again, I think as Louis mentioned, it's probably best that we can sit down and spend more time going through this offline. Again, I know that there are several other folks that need to present, but I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions now if we want to try. Otherwise, I can keep going.
All right, we'll just keep going.
Okay. Okay, so here is the MMO history that dates back to 2008. As you can see, we're at about 1 million way back when, and I think I made the analogy before that, that was our hummingbird, and now it's our albatross. So in 2023, we were at $8 million, or over $8 million. But as you can see, 2025, given the funding level of the pensions, that $8 million has now dropped down to 6.6. So there's our $1.4 million difference in our MMO. And again, it's a combination of all 4 pension plans. Here's a comparison. Again, this is probably best for you to review, but as far as the MMO, how that's calculated, what I really wanted to highlight here, we've got our 3 pension plans that make up the aggregate plan. What I wanted to highlight is the lines that are in green. Those are basically the only input that we as the city have into this. The rest is provided to us by our actuaries. So based on their valuations, they provide us with all of these percentages. And I'd be happy to go through later what all the other line items are, how they're calculated, and we could even have our actuaries come in and explain some of this if you would like to, if you'd like us to do that. Okay. Another portion of the budget that I wanted to highlight was Chapter 285 of the ordinance, and that is our fee structure. What we did is we selected a few of the different larger buckets of fees. For this example, we're looking at the parking violations and proposed changes to the ticket costs. Okay, so what I'm showing here is based on the last completed year, so 2023, the number of tickets that were issued for each of these different types of violations, what the violation amount would have been, and then the remitted amount. So showing that, unfortunately, folks weren't paying on time, or I guess fortunately for us, but unfortunately for them, they weren't paying in time, so they were actually incurring more fees that then came to the city. So if you look at that and you compare the rate of ticketing back in 2023 and compare that, or now use the proposed new fee structure in the 2025 ticket cost column, you'll see that what we are estimating is about $178,000 in additional fees. I think we were conservative in the figure that we put into the budget. It was about $150. But just to provide you with some background, I know that there are several other fees that are in Chapter 285 that we did make adjustments to, and we can obviously go through those. But this was one of the bigger ones that I wanted to touch on.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
real quick question.
Yep.
We're on fees, but I think this is probably over a broader perspective. We haven't talked about things that haven't been collected yet in a long time. And I know at one point in time, we had a pretty big number that was uncollected. Are we still at that point, or do we have any idea how much is uncollected? Let me put it like that.
We do what we have done is we've worked with Portnoy on getting those collections. So previously we tried to do those in-house. It wasn't as effective. So, and especially with the water shutoffs, when those turned off, we turned a lot of our unpaid delinquencies over to Portnoy. So every year, historically, we'd always sent over real estate taxes, but now we're sending over utility billing. So I'll get the latest and greatest numbers from them, and I can provide that to council and let you know where we stand.
I mean, I see how many boots are around in the town, so that's a lot of uncollected revenue. Of course, they don't get to use their car, but I mean, I can imagine that there's a lot of other people who are somewhere between there and zero as far as fees owed. I know certain threshold that they have to get to a boot, but I was just wondering I see the tickets here. I was just wondering how far we are with those as far as behind.
Okay, we can take a look at the parking tickets too and
Tickets
see.
are collected but easier than water and sewer
Right.
garbage.
Right.
My understanding, Mayor, is when people get a boot on, because I had the same question, I'm seeing boots on seems like a long time. And it seems like it's up to the discretion of the parking, Mr. Gilbert, and I'm not debating it, I'm just saying what I learned. So if somebody calls in and says, I have a hard time paying this fee to get the boot off, they won't take a payment plan, but they'll give them so much time to come up with the money. So I think we don't have,
That's not our policy.
well, we don't have uniformity we're not acting on uniformity as to, we're not acting on guidelines.
I'm not sure about that, but when the chief is here, we can certainly, and he talks about his department, we can certainly bring that up.
You had a friend that lost his truck.
Lost his truck. Relatively only 1 year old.
Yeah.
They smashed it. They said they smashed it. They sold it.
So, I mean, we're not,
And so last slide I have here is just the budget hearings, and we discussed this at the directors meeting today and came up with the proposed budget hearing schedule. So October 22nd, we're going to cover all revenues, and then administration departments. So those would be mayor, council, finance, controller. You can read them here. And we typically do that because the expenses in those administrative departments are relatively small. But yet a lot of the revenue is in those departments. So we kind of cover those all in one. On November 5th, we've got DPW and DCED. November 19th, police and fire. And then December 10th, we'll be planning and codes, and then obviously any other discussions that council would like to have at that point. But that would be the last budget hearing.
question, Mayor. November 5th is election day. You want to keep that?
You running?
I'm not.
Oh.
But I mean, it's a busy day.
We brought it up at directors meeting, right? When I say to the directors, are you any of you running? No, it's not a local election day. It's federal and state. I don't see a problem with it. If you wanna move it back to 7:30, I don't care. I mean, but that's the day that we always had. It's usually a committee meeting, we have budget hearings.
I'm okay with it personally, I just didn't know for public if it would be a hindrance for people that wanted to come out and hear the budget presentation.
They can vote on their way to the meeting,
I mean, I was,
or earlier, yeah.
work schedule. It's
7
up to you. I'm
7 a.m. to 8 p.m. I don't care, like I said, you wanna make it later in the evening, that's fine with me, but I think that November 5th meeting is a long meeting. We got all the Department of Public Works plus Economic Development, which is very small and a very small budget, but doesn't have many line items, but Public Works does.
So I'm just asking, and again, I can come, but to make it more accessible for the public, can we move it to the 29th of October? The week before?
I'd rather keep it this way.
I just went by what we did in the past. We always did the Tuesday, the committee meetings that were not held in November and December for that reason. They were planned, they were budget hearings. It doesn't matter to me, I
I
work.
like the 2 week between each one
Me
to
too.
have some time to take a look at the departments that we're gonna be taking a look at. 1 week is tough, challenging.
Well, we can discuss it. What else you have, Mark?
That was it. So,
Okay.
thank you.
I appreciate the overview on the budget, and I'll let Debbie come up next.
See you later, Mark.
And then Gretchen.
Okay.
Isaac said he's like, I got it.
Just waiting for that glitch here.
He was confident. Okay, he got it. He still got it.
Perfect. Okay. Hi, my name is Debbie Rice. I'm with Phenomenal Events and Marketing, your social media communications of the city of Easton. So I'm just giving an overview of what we're doing.
Let me just preface it.
No.
So Debbie is on the back end managing our social media. She's the resource that the administration uses. You all have not met her yet, so I wanted to take the opportunity to have her discuss what she discusses now with us at every of our directors' meetings on Tuesday mornings. Okay, so as I explained to the directors, and I'm going to explain to council, she's our resource. She doesn't make the content; she receives the content, and then she puts it out. All right, but I did want her to review some of the analytics behind it. This is not a long presentation, but it'll give you an idea of our reach so far. And I want this to be something that perhaps we revisit at least once a quarter, and we talk about this because it's important.
Louis,
So, yes.
sorry. Whatever we're getting presented tonight, can we get that in an email as well? I know Councilwoman Rose would like to see it.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So without further ado, Debbie started in the beginning of the year, and we are slowly progressing to doing a little bit more and more. I just wanted us to. We had a transition, and there was a lot because Tracy did a lot, and now Deb has been nicely taking over, the social media aspect and the communication aspect, and I think that we're going to be doing more. So I'll let Debbie. Why don't you just and also introduce yourself? Tell us
Okay.
a little bit about your background, which is important. Like as I
Okay.
always reference,
Okay.
discovery.
Right. So I own a company for the last 12 years, Phenomenal Events and Marketing. I do social media for about 40 different organizations and businesses. I also do event planning for over 300 events a year. My largest clients are the County of Northampton and Provident Bank. So always somewhere fun, always taking pictures and doing something different. I sit on several boards. I sit on Workforce Lehigh Valley. I sit on Discover Lehigh Valley. I'm an adjunct professor for the college teaching event marketing, social media, and event planning as well for the last 8 years. So.
Good, no, that's good. Now they know.
All right, perfect. So my first slide is the schedule of what's coming up in terms of content. This doesn't mean that if street sweeping gets canceled or something happens, we're not going to add that in. This is just what's known and coming up that we're going to promote. I just learned about Space Fest, so that's going to be added in. Dates for the budget meeting that I just saw, those are going to be added in as well. So as soon as I get content, that also gets added in, but this is what's up and coming. So the newsletter went out again for the second month in a row. Every month, the directors will get an email and local organizations on the 20th of the month saying, hey, send me your content. On the 25th, I ask that your content is due. And then the 1st of the month, the email sets out early in the morning. So our last email had just shy of 5,000 sends. We had 2,800 opens, 89 clicks, which is 2% on clicks, which is industry standard.
So this is an online, it's a electronic newsletter. It's not the same one that we discussed that we're going to send out next year. That's in the budget. So we're not trying to necessarily duplicate efforts. They're different. The paper-based serves a purpose as well as the electronic one. The paper-based will be more broad, but there is definitely, I think, an appetite for the market, as you can see right here, to get an electronic-based newsletter. And this one has been pretty successful right now. And again, we've started this slowly with Tracy, and now we're continuing to send this newsletter out, and it's evolving. Now the total numbers that you see up there are pretty good, generally speaking. They're good numbers. So I want you guys to be aware, because this is the first time you're seeing this per se, the analytics. So I want you to be aware of the total numbers as we discuss it. And I think, so we had almost 5,000 sends and 2,800 opens. That's not bad. When we get to social media, you'll see the numbers are a lot higher, especially for this past weekend.
How does a resident get on the list to receive this?
Good question.
So they can sign up through the website. We're also going to be posting and different things. And then the newsletter, you can actually sign up if you've gotten it. But it's on the Bugler. If you ask about content, I think it comes up as well, because I was playing around with it. So, yeah.
I believe we've also done billing, but that's where we can also put that in there. What's that, Frank?
They told me the microphone.
Oh, okay.
So industry standard for,
Roger has a question real quick.
oh, I'm sorry.
Quick question, just in your experience, the thing that really sticks out to me here is that there's only 4% opens on mobile. And is that something that, in your experience, is typical? It just seems like it's really, really, really low.
It is really low. But I looked at some of the different places, and a lot of them are office and organizational emails. So they're opening it up on their work computer. They're not opening it up on their phone. It's not like you're opening up your Macy's email and it's on your phone because it's your fun email. It's your corporate or your business email, and so you're opening it up at your desk.
Yeah. I was just wondering if it had to do with format, you know.
It's formatted for both desktop
both,
and,
okay.
yep, it is formatted for both. Industry standard of
Seemed low.
opens.
Seemed very low.
It is
4%.
incredibly freakishly low. I agree with you. But industry opens is standard 40%. We're at 58%. Industry standard for the clicks, actually clicking on it, and I'll show you the heat map in a second, is 2%, and we're at 2%.
Excuse me, Devin, did you find out that that's based on work time versus out of work time, that number goes up and down?
So we sent out the last email last month. We sent it out on a holiday, and we had little to no opens to the next day, but the minute it was time for work the next day, we got all the
yeah,
opens.
that makes sense.
Yeah, so they're opening it up at the beginning of a work day.
We may see a change with the newsletter that Councilwoman Rose is asking to be produced next year. So in there, we will market, our newsletter here if we have that potential. But that may augment the amount of online readers as well. But you're right about the mobile. That's
Yeah.
interesting. That
It's
is
just
low.
stuck out.
Yeah, I
It
guess,
is, it is really odd. Like, I will agree with you. But we're happy that they're opening them on their desktop, so. So this is the heat map for the last newsletter.
is it, no, that's not, is it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
So I broke it up because there was content that didn't have
Oh, I
links, and then it didn't fit on a page, and I didn't want to do the sign.
gotcha,
So so I tried to cut it up. So the first one is the alfresco dining, the header 42, farmers market was 40, garlic fest of course was 51. It was a little higher because it was festival weekend. But the highest click we had was the fire department connect information for citizens to get that information at 60. But a lot of them are over 40 and 50. And going back at the emails that were sent prior to me, clicks were usually 2 or 3 on object, like an item, only got 2 or 3 clicks. If you had something incredibly newsworthy, you would get really high clicks. But the fact that we're getting really balanced high clicks on everything is great. People are looking at more than one thing. They're figuring out the UGI information that Dave Hopkins sent over for content. Those 2 links got 51 and 53 as well. So again, it's really balanced. The part-time firefighter position, 41 links. Carl Sterner Arch Trail for the park events, those were all 49, 50, and 54 again. So people are definitely interested in the content coming out. So this is our social media stats. So we're reaching, in this period, 81,000 people are seeing and reaching the page. 13.7 thousand on Instagram. And then the visits where they're actually interacting, clicking, or spending time, which is a visit, is just shy of 13,000 on Facebook and 22.7 on Instagram. So we are getting a really good reach on our social. A lot of people don't interact. When they do tend to interact, maybe it's not always positive, but we are getting good people seeing everything. Whether they're liking it or not, they may not be. We're not a fun, some of it is fun, but like street sweeping, people are seeing it. They're just not like, oh, I like that it's canceled today. Like, you're not going to get that emoji or that interaction. So this is our actual demographics on Facebook and Instagram. We're very high women-centric on both. It's the younger generation of 35 to pretty much 55 that we're getting our strongest. So our seniors aren't on it, obviously our youth. Maybe if we were doing Snapchat, we might be getting more youth, but we're hitting the target that we really need to be hitting. And then lastly, this is the snapshot of our most popular post for recent. As you can see, Facade Friday is showing up quite a bit. There we are getting lots of interactions, and one of the things I really want to stress is it's positive interactions. These are beautiful, what great work, we're glad this is happening, this is a really great, renovation. So it's really positive boost.
perfect.
And that's all I have.
Deb,
Thank
can
you.
email that to me?
Any questions from council for Deb? Thank you, Deb.
Thank you.
I just have one comment. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you, Crystal.
Okay. Deb, I think the posts are looking better. I think I would suggest continuing to QC the posts before they go out, because I have noticed a lot of grammatical errors, as well as double checking dates and times. I know that could be an issue with what someone's submitting to you. The other thing from a social media best practice, there's a lot of text, especially when there's a meeting or something like that. That usually is, it's better to have an image and limited text in a post image versus putting it both in the post verbiage and the image. But I would love to sit down with you at some point and go over some best practices, and if you have some time in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And you will have to explain it to me more, because our post for the meetings don't have any actual meta text with it. It's just the post of the image. So
I think, like, for example, like there was one of the examples you just had up on the screen. There was a lot of text in that the image that you post, and then also in your like text, the text verbiage that you include with the post. That's what I was referring to.
The only time you really get a lot of it is for Facade Friday, and that's because they're naming the location, they're naming the company that does the work to give them the shout out that they need, and it's the information submitted. So those are really the only ones that come with text. A lot of text for it, and that's because of the nature of what all has to be included in those Facade Friday. But then those are also our highest interacted and highest rated posts.
Why don't?
Yeah,
But
I
we
would-
can follow up.
I love-
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
I love the facade photos. I think they're great, and it helps get the word out about the program and explain that program. The only other comment I had from the emailed newsletter is maybe we should check the back end of the email program. Do we use Constant Contact, or what are we using for
Yes.
Constant
email
Contact.
marketing?
Constant contact.
Yeah, we may have to update some of the DNS records because it does seem like a low open rate, even though, I mean, I know everyone likes to throw around industry standards, but it does seem a little low for something that's hyper local.
Okay.
Thank you, Deb. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Rose. Gretchen, you're up. Glad to have you back at City Hall.
You look comfortable.
I think Mark's here too in spirit.
Is Mark is on Zoom?
Yeah, he's on.
Yeah, he is. I think, Mark, if you can actually unmute yourself.
Oh, there's Mark. I see his name.
There he is up there.
Yeah, Mark's iPhone.
No video. Can't see Mark.
Well, he's in the process
Oh, that's
of
right.
possibly evacuating. So
Maybe
we're
yeah.
lucky we've got him at all.
Yeah.
You're right.
Stay safe, Mark.
I'm surprised he's on. You're right.
Yeah, well, it might be that his service is
Single, yeah, probably not good.
too.
Oh, this is a nice spot.
That's the old one. You've
There we
already-
go. Figured out how to use this thing.
There.
Just get one of your kids to show you. The youngest one.
Yeah, they've
Younger the
already
better.
evacuated to a hotel, so.
Yeah, my sister-in-law's down there by you.
Oh, you know, it's just a PDF. Just need to do like.
Yeah, it's not looking good right this moment. It's surprising how bad. I mean, it's gonna. I mean, I don't know. We'll just wait and see.
Yeah.
So.
Hopefully it goes someplace other
I've never
than
put
where you're
boards
at.
on a house before, so. Yeah, I mean, we're right in Sarasota on the bay, so we're not on the Keys. They got hammered last time, and we were fine, but this one's talking. We can do 12 feet of storm surge at this house, but it's 100 years old, but 15, I don't think so.
15's,
So,
yeah.
and we're right there, so we'll see.
Wave action. is
We'll see.
fair.
Anyway, let Gretchen take it away.
Yeah, is that what you? Okay. All right, that's fine.
Okay.
Isn't this yours?
Thank you.
Okay.
I know a lot of you in the room here, but for those of you who I don't know, I'm Gretchen Rice of VM Development Group. On the phone with us is Mark Mulligan of VM Development Group. I'm sure he's sorry he can't be here today, but important things to tend to in
Yes, he
Florida.
does.
We first came before you in 2021 with our presentation for the redevelopment of the Easton Iron or Easton Metalworks iron site on Bushkill Drive, just down the street from the Simon Silk Mill, and we were awarded or named the preferred developer for that site. Since then, a lot has happened. We're happy to be back finally here to discuss the finalization of the agreement of sale for the purchase of the property. I have here the presentation we originally presented because truthfully not too much has changed from a design perspective on the site. Some things have changed as far as the order of operations related to the expenditure of some of the grant funds that were allocated to the property, but we're here to go over that to share with you the developments and get started here. Project team remains the same. Alloy 5, Randy Galliotto and Mike Metzger, and Omnes, who's the landscape architecture firm who's located at the Simon Silk Mill in Easton. No changes here. We haven't finalized the civil engineer, although given HDR's involvement in the site to date with its work with the city, some of the initial environmental engineering, we will likely continue with them for continuity on the project. Sorry about that little dot there. But this was a rendering that was initially provided, done by Alloy 5. Not exactly what we will end up with as far as the shape of the buildings, but from the location of the buildings, it still gives a good idea of the current site plan, which includes 2 buildings on the north parcel of the site, and 2 buildings on the south parcel of the site. The idea is to work with the city. We'll get to this a little bit further, possibly an acquisition of a PA Sites grant, which is a new program recently announced in Pennsylvania, to help with some streetscape improvements to Bushkill Drive, possibly a connection to the Simon Silk Mill, not only via the Carl Sterner Arts Trail and the pedestrian bridge, that the second pedestrian bridge the city's working on currently, but also hopefully along the sidewalk to connect the Simon Silk Mill site to this site, so that the commercial spaces that we build in the first floor of some of these units here can be connected or more connected to the thriving kind of business community at the Simon Silk Mill. I mentioned the connection to the Carl Sterner Arts Trail. We've been working actively with Dave and his team in Public Works. I believe the city currently has a multimodal or intermodal grant to help with the construction of that bridge, and that's located here on the side of the property. At the moment, and again, we won't finalize this until likely we're a little bit farther in the development phase, but we're looking at approximately 200 residential units and between 5 and 20,000 square feet of commercial space on the site, which could translate into up to roughly 15 commercial businesses, possibly, if we divide it up, as was done at the Simon Silk Mill. I mentioned Bushkill Drive improvements, including what we'd like to do, and we're working with the city to do, is add parallel parking along Bushkill Drive and some traffic calming and crosswalks between the two sides of the parcel. One of the, not problems that we have at the Simon Silk Mill, but one thing we are always working with is the public using the Simon Silk Mill parking lot as a parking lot for the trail. And we think it's great that people are actually using the trail and are parking there, but we'd like to be able to provide more parking for people to do that. And we think street parking on Bushkill Drive would be really helpful, right there next to the 2 access points to the Carl Sterner Arts Trail. One of the things that has changed since the original proposal in 2021 was the status of the ISRP grant from the state of Pennsylvania. Many of you may know what that is. Industrial Sites Reuse Program was utilized at the Simon Silk Mill and some other sites here in the city. The city was successful in receiving that grant probably almost 4 years ago at this point, and the scope that was proposed may have been a little bit premature before we knew exactly what was happening on the site. But it's looking like the extension of that grant at this point is unlikely. We'll consider working with the state on that, but it is more likely that we will pursue that in the form of a loan, a private loan to us as the developer. Otherwise, it would just continue to prolong the transaction of this property from the city to the private sector, which we know everyone's interest here is to get it done as fast as we can do. So our attempts to expedite that include us taking that grant on as a loan instead of as a grant through the city. If it remained a grant, the city would have to retain ownership of the property while the money was expended. We do know.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
Just to be clear, so this plan is just to speed up the process?
Initially, I mean, yes, essentially. I mean, also there are some issues with what that grant was written to do. The grant, I think, was written to completely solve all the environmental issues at the site as far as the capping is concerned, and we now know that $1 million is not sufficient to do that. You wouldn't be able to accomplish what that grant said it would accomplish 3 years, 4 years later now, given price increases, et cetera. Yes, exactly. So we will be working with the city. It looks like the new PA Sites grant program allows private sector applicants. It does not have to flow through the city. So from the city's perspective, that's a positive thing. Part of the agreement of sale requests and that the city assist us from a political perspective on possibly a RACP grant, although it's seeming like that's not going to be the way things go in the future. It'll be more these PA Sites programs, but assisting us in securing one of those 2 types of grants for the site, and also with transferring the ISRP former grant into a loan, which might require a new application process, but working with the powers that be at DCD to assist us in doing that so that the project doesn't lose that ISRP $1 million designation. Moving forward, This is another rendering from the very initial proposal. Again, we didn't ask LA5 to go back out and do any new renderings. It's been 3.5 something years. So before we submit to Planning Commission, we will be updating all of this so that it's more consistent with the current plan. There is still a plan to, well, there was a plan to possibly work with Nurture Nature on the site, and that's in part why we're here so many years later. The city did receive a grant to investigate with Nurture Nature the possibility of locating some kind of environmental science educational structure on this site, and we attended many meetings. Omnes was hired by the city to facilitate those discussions, and we sat with them for many, many hours, and ultimately it was decided, as you all know, that they're going to be expanding in their current location, and it wasn't going to work for both parties to exist on this property, and it was going to be a very expensive endeavor for what they had planned on the site. But that does leave the southernmost portion of the southern parcel for recreational opportunities, and the trail, which will run along the southern portion of the site. Not sure if we have a rendering of that, but Dave can speak to that. And we're hoping also that the PA Sites grant that we might apply for would be able to pay for the construction of the portion of the trail that would be on site. So in addition to the trail itself, we don't know what it might look like, but we do have opportunities for there to be some kind of recreational component to the project where people can hop off the trail and access the site for recreational purposes. These are some of the numbers that we talked about on the first slide. 200-ish residential units. We'll see how that works out. The current plan that we came up with the 4 buildings along the streets on either side was vetted through the zoning department here while Mr. Narowski was still here. And our attempt was to just come up with a plan that didn't require any kind of variances. So that's where we are now. But that doesn't mean it could change between now and when we submit. But this is our plan is 4 buildings over the course of probably 3 to 4 years, 1 building at a time. It helps with the absorption rate so that we're not I say dumping 200 units in the city at one time, which we understand we're doing downtown, but we think the absorption rate might be a little bit slower farther out from the downtown of the city.
Is this pretty typical that you're only estimating approximately 1 new resident per unit?
200 to 250 residents. So no, so if it was 200-ish units, it'd probably be on the higher side of 250. We don't, 2 bedrooms, yes, you're usually seeing 2 occupants.
Low. I mean,
sure.
The occupancy seems low for 200 apartments.
And I would agree with that. We know from parking usually that we have about a 1.5 ratio. So yes, agree with you. That could be higher. But I think that could be better. I mean, the more feet on the street from an economic development impact, the better. More disposable income being spent in the city is the theory behind that. Again, we're not sure how the commercial space will pan out at the moment, but if it's anything like the Silk Mill, we intend to have smaller, more local businesses. I don't want to say mom and pop, the terminology that's thrown around, but that seems to be how we've had luck at the Silk Mill. Local people, local entrepreneurs, and we've been really pleased to see how many of the businesses there have succeeded and have asked for more space, and if one business leaves, they've expanded into the space next door, and that's what we really like to see. We've been lucky to have some tenants there for a very long time at this point, starting in 2016 when some of the earliest ones first moved in. Permanent jobs are hard to estimate, but with any of those new businesses come new jobs. And of course, the real estate tax revenue is probably going to be much more than 500,000 if I had to guess, but that was just a round number. We're looking at the Silk Mill based on the current projections. I know we're still in Alerta and the taxes are still increasing year over year, but at full build out, it's looking like the Silk Mill is about 700,000 annually in taxes, not to the city specifically, but to, all 3 of the taxing bodies.
What would you say the average income of a resident?
It's funny you should ask that because I just asked our property managers that today because we're dealing with possibly applying for Alerta in the Catasauqua Borough when dealing with their school board. And that was one of the questions that they asked us. So the response that I got was it's slightly different at Watermark than at some of our other projects. Watermark seems to be a little bit higher, but for the other projects, they were saying about $65,000. And closer to 75 for Watermark.
Very interesting.
that good or bad? Oh, okay.
Times 1.95.
EIT, right, sure.
That's better than our estimates.
Well, that's good to know. So I know there were some detailed questions about the agreement of sale, which I'm happy to answer. I think Dave Hopkins, maybe, do you want to say anything, or you just, no, only if there are questions. Okay, so, very good. I'm happy to answer any questions. Mark's available, I'm sure, if he's still here to answer any questions. Mark, you there?
So I just want to let you know, I have a lot of interest in this property.
I know, because I know where you're located. We know. We were hoping we could maybe deed you the whole cliff when we're done. You could have that.
You can have the cliff.
I'm up the cliff.
Well, I just want to remind council that part of this presentation is to ask questions that you may have regarding the contract. We do understand, the project and who's behind it. That's not a concern here, so to speak. What we discussed in executive session, I thought was is pertinent in some cases to ask here the developer, the purchaser of the property, with regards to the environmental cleanup, et cetera, and how this is going to transition. So, this is your opportunity to ask questions.
I do have one, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but it seems to me that there's a rail right-of-way that runs parallel to Bushkill Drive.
It does.
And is there any discussion of making that also a trail of some sort, taking it down to the intersection so that individuals can cross at the intersection?
Are you talking about this sliver of land that runs just south of Bushkill Drive?
Yes.
Okay. So, well, Dave can speak to that, but that's part of the conveyance, and I think that's part of what you wanted to use for sidewalk, if I'm not mistaken. But go ahead.
So on that section, we have an Bushkill connectivity grant through DCED, and so the pecking order was get the bridge done first. It was $1.3 million, and then deal with the crossings at the project site and the extension of the Carl Starner Arch Trail through the site. And then as the trail winds, it's not designed yet, but it's likely going to hug the creek where there's some floodplain, and then it's going to get closer to the road. And then at that point, we were kind of thinking maybe a cycle track, which is a two-way bike lane or something that will go down through the railroad right-of-way. Once we get to the car dealership, it gets a little tricky because abandoned rail can be complicated, and and they actually recorded the abandoned rail onto their deed. That's why we're not going all the way around and through. So that might be a future discussion with them to see, rather than cross Bushkill, cross Dietrich, cross back, and have that circuitous route for a pedestrian. It would be nice if we could.
Yeah, I appreciate the college and the city making the trail so that it joins there.
Right.
I think that was really good, but again, you got a crosswalk in the middle of, not at an intersection, and I was just thinking if we could take the trail down to the intersection.
Yep.
People stop on both.
And that's where. And that's where we would just about end up, because we have some right-of-way in the front. You may recall that there's some,
Right.
And we would cross over to the 901 building, but it would be nice if we could just continue right around and kind of stay on the trail. So we'll see if we can work that out. The other thing that might help City Council with, this is a tremendously complex project to try and mate the developer's needs, the city's needs, the environmental cleanup, how we transfer sort of a dirty title, things like that. And right now we're out to bid for a qualified environmental person. And this is a process that the EPA sort of mandates, because the pot at the end of the rainbow is the release of liability letter from DEP, which ultimately is what we all need to make this thing happen. And in order to do that, we have to follow the Act 2 process. So right now, I think right November 4th or so, we'll receive bids for the qualified environmental person. That person will be like the key point of contact for managing the remediation process as we move forward. Once we select that person or firm, we will then use our $500,000 EPA grant to then create the remedial action plan. And that will be designed to a point where it'll include all the investigation on the site, the design of the remediation, test digs for utilities, and maybe even some further environmentals that might be needed. And then ultimately, once we get to the goal through the remedial action plan is to get through the conservation district and have a plan with enough detail that we can get a NIPD's permit, and then that NIPD's permit will ultimately trigger the closing, the transfer of the property to the developer, and then move on from there through the developer will then manage the remediation and then get to the point of construction. And I will say VM has been incredibly cooperative and willing to take this on. Most wouldn't. I think the process as outlined in the agreement of sale is the most efficient path forward for us. We've been at this for years, and now there's finally some real progress here, and it's pretty exciting.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not an oncoming train.
That's right. Yes. Yep.
While you're there, I just have another question. I know we have a sewage pumping station right down there on Bushkill Drive.
We do.
And an additional 200 units. Is that going to be a capacity issue there?
So I don't know if you recall, but when we had the CARES Act funding, we purchased the replacement pumping station. And at the time, we didn't have enough money for the labor. So we then applied for another grant and did receive it. We went out for bid to get it installed, and the bids were ridiculous. And I think in talking to the contractors, they had some real concern about rock and how that could drive their costs up right in that location. So what we decided to do was we decided to leave the existing concrete wet well in place. We had it inspected. Even though it's old, it's still in great shape, and that way we can avoid all that excavation. So that is currently out to bid right now. Bids are due in October 11th, and then it will increase capacity. Our crew installed a new 6-inch force main, ready to be connected when we can get the new pumping station in. But that was one of the reasons why we felt we had to replace that. Simply, the silk mill put a lot of flow in there. This is going to put additional flow in. There's still some properties out there that, maybe not now, but 10 years from now, you may see additional development in the corridor. Who knows what the college is going to do? So yeah, I think we're good from a pumping standpoint.
Yeah, I think I appreciate Dave you mentioning about VM Development. And VM Development was the first developer to come in the early 2009 or 10 when they did the Pomeroy building and the Pomeroy lofts. And we can't see it anymore, but that Pomeroy building was vacant for 37 years. And 6 mayors tried to restore it and put it back together. And Gretchen was the director of economic development at the time in the city. And I was 2 of those mayors of the 6. But that started really the development that came. And we worked well with Mark. And when the silk mill came up, and we had 350,000 square feet there of vacant property for a couple decades, we did the RFP again, and we selected Mark to do that based on what he'd done at the Pomeroy building. And then when we went to build this building and sell the Alpha building, he bought that. And I might tell you that he paid over $500,000 more than what the appraised value was. So I think we did well with Mark. Mark's been, and VM, I shouldn't say Mark because Gretchen's here, she's a partner. VM Development has been good for the city. Their development down on Larry Holmes Drive is to take advantage of the Governor Wolf visibility of the river. So I think that was done, and people are happy. And the fact that Riverwalk isn't being built is very happy by the neighbors. So they've been a good partner. We appreciate that. Mark, you're on the line, so I hope you heard all that. I said nice things about you.
Well, I started laughing because every time we're together, you always manage to bring up the Pomeroy building and 6 mayors, and you were 3 of them or whatever.
I don't change my jokes. I change my audience.
Oh,
fair enough.
But truthfully, we're thrilled to be part of the renaissance of Easton, and we're even happier to see that other large developers in the area have come after us, which legitimizes our investment, legitimizes what's happening here in Easton, and just couldn't be more excited and proud of what's going on here.
Gretchen, just a question for me, two questions actually.
Sure.
As far as the contract goes, who will be responsible for doing the initial boring or soil testing stuff? Is that the city of Easton? Is it the developer? And the second part of that, how are each entity paid out? Is the city being paid out up front? Are they being paid on the back end? How's that work?
Sure. Dave, do you want to speak to the borings?
Get your steps in, Dave.
Because I think some of them may have been done already with an EPA grant.
So,
A lot of boring.
so yeah, we have done some initial testing and boring, but what's really going to get things moving is once the qualified environmental person is onboarded with us, we can then start spending our $500,000 grant that we have through the EPA. And so the idea behind that grant is to get enough testing on the site, trenching for utilities, test digs, and get that remedial action plan designed so that we can get to the conservation district. So we have some milestones: onboarding the QEP, getting the remedial action plan done, getting as much site work and design work done as we can for the money, and then getting to the conservation district is a huge milestone, because that's probably a 9-month process for us. And then at the point that we get our NIPD's permit from the conservation district is when that will trigger the closing on the property and the transfer of the property. So the city will, and we have to own the property during the initial cleanup. There's way too much risk on the developer.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
But once we secure the NIPD's permit, then we're pretty certain that we've met most of the standards. The developer is going to know what the major requirements on the property are, mostly from a stormwater standpoint. And then I think the comfort level increases to the point where we transfer the property, and then they will take over the actual remediation of the property.
And Dave, when they did the silk mill, that was part of Brownfield's money, the grants of Brownfield's. Is there any more existing money like that around, or that's all good?
That's where the $500,000
that's where that's
came
coming from. Okay,
that's EPA Brownfield's money.
Okay.
Brownfield's assessment, I guess.
Thank you.
While you're there, I know in Forks and Palmer, the Bushkill is considered impaired. It isn't, as far as I know, hasn't been declared impaired in Easton.
I believe it is.
It is now?
Yes.
Okay. So, are there BMPs associated with this project?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
I mean, they'll at a minimum they'll have to meet our saldo requirements for discharge.
Okay.
Okay.
But I don't know if there's going to be any additional. Also, all three water bodies around Easton are impaired for something. The Lehigh is sediment. One of them is arsenic, which is mostly naturally occurring, and I can't remember what the other one is. And I don't know whether it's the Delaware or the Bushkill that has the impairment for the arsenic. But yeah, we'll just have to see what the NIPD's permit says and what the conditions are.
Mayor, I think I applaud VM. This is a big project, and not just any developer can do it. I guess that's the reason why you and only one other developer came forward, and by far you guys were, more worthy and had the capabilities to get it done. So I'm glad this site is getting cleaned up and moving forward. So I appreciate you guys making, what is this, third investment? Fourth?
Oh, no.
Fifth?
One, two,
Silk,
one, two,
Pomeroy, Governor
Alpha.
Wolf, Watermark, fifth one,
Alpha.
National.
National.
Yeah, well, never mind. We're not going to count anymore.
Jacob
So, no, I
Produce.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, Jacob Produce. Got him.
But if we get back to Mr. Brown's question, though, at the closing, because certainly there was the impression or question raised in executive session, the sale price is $1.5 million. $100,000 would be paid down. Is it correct that the city then is taking back the financing for the balance?
Unsure. We have the option to do that per the contract the way it's written now. We also have the option to close in a more traditional manner with our construction financing in place. The reason we came up with that was prior to us determining that the NPDS permit was going to be a condition to closing, we were trying to figure out a way for us to close even sooner. And we knew that a site that's not been formally cleaned up yet is not really financeable with any bank. So we were thinking if we had to take on the responsibility of doing the actual remediation act, in other words, the cap or the site work at the site, and we were going to be using ISRP funds or other grant funds to do that, if we had a significant challenge with a bank in getting financing for this quote-unquote dirty site, we would have this as an option that the city would close until we could complete the site work and have a clean site that was then financeable. It at least enables the city to convey title and also to make some money on the transaction in the interim. I don't know if Mark is still on there. I mean, at the moment, that's not our preference. So I think we'd like to go the more traditional route.
Well,
but
really
it's
just,
there as an option for us if we
yeah,
need
I think, Gretchen, I think you fully summed it up. I think the bottom line here is that, you know, this is a partnership and will remain a partnership until we can get the site clean enough, as Dave said, to the point where we can finance it. It's complicated. This is a big project, as you all just stated, and we would prefer to just continue as a partner. I mean, almost at the Silt Mill, we took over. We got the bank comfortable enough. The site work was not completed through the grant funding sources there at that site, but we got our banking groups confident that we were taking over an almost clean site, and thereby we were able to, move forward and close. So the moment that we feel that we can get to that point, then we will fully, we will close without the financing is our goal from any kind of city source.
The only thing about the agreement of sale, Joel, that I ask is that we resolve the driveway for the keypacks or whatever.
Oh, yes. So that's written in there. We didn't want to do any kind of
Yeah, that's in
transfer or
there.
anything until we have our approvals. And then it was going to be either deeding the portion of the driveway to them
Okay,
at
so
no
it's still
cost
there.
or an easement. In either way, the homeowners were just required to pay for whatever recording is required to do so, but we weren't going to actually charge them for it.
Yeah, that's in 1.01A.
And I think the agreement provides that we have to acknowledge the easement and
does.
allow
It
them
does
to
for that.
Yeah,
continue to use
we
it.
put that in there, that there's acknowledgement that the easement's there, so there can't be a claim at a later point that rejecting the right to the ingress and egress.
And truthfully, there's no reason to not. It's not an integral part of the site at all.
The other question that I had after being read the contract, it said that you have, VM Development has until, for 60 months to finish the project. That just seems like a really long time.
The way we calculated that was a year for site work and a year for each building to allow for absorption rates if the market's different, if something, we don't want to build a building if we have a half vacant building sitting on the site. So obviously our preference would be to have that be more in a 3-year timeline. But we were just trying to be as conservative as possible.
Well, and let's just be honest. We came to you guys, or you came to us in 21, and now it's 20, almost 25, and we've sort of been just waiting around for you guys. So,
Well, we wanted you,
we definitely want to get on it. But it's
Mark,
done.
we wanted you to have a chance to finish Watermark.
Thank
It was purposely done
Oh, thank
for
you.
that benefit.
Well, we appreciate the extra time. Thank you.
Clearly, doing it faster is more beneficial to us from a financial perspective, assuming that it's
Absolutely.
leasing and then less interest paid and et cetera. If there's a major issue with that, we can attempt to amend it if you'd like to be shortened, but we're going to go as
But I
quickly as
don't think we can. Is the bottom line. I just really can't, because we think that I think we've been. The mayor said we've been great partners with the city for almost 15 years, and we've always been honest. We've always said this is what we need, and we've always done what we said we do. So
That's correct.
we think we don't need it, but we should have it in there.
Okey doke.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Thank you all.
Yeah, now I'm clear in my mind.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Chief, you're up. talk about the multi-agency response center and the lithium
If
batteries.
we need it.
Yeah, let's talk about them batteries.
Yeah.
You have a preference on which one I do first?
No,
Okay. I will try to give you the Cliff Note version for both.
good.
But if you have any questions, you can
Clifton
call me,
version.
stop by and see me, email me, whatever you need. I'll be more than happy to take all those questions.
Which one is it?
So we're going to do the mark first, I guess.
Yeah, it's fine. Do the mark
Start
first.
with that one. Hey, you're welcome. Okay, so Ferry Street fire, and the end result was the multi-agency resource center. All right. So for Councilwoman Rose and Councilman Pittibone, who were not on council at the time, I'm just going to cover a couple of things so they understand what actually took place before we get deep into the other stuff. So, on-duty personnel was 11 that day. 2018 and 2041 were on an EMS call 2 blocks away at 11th and Lehigh. They arrived on scene within a minute, and on arrival, 911, 913, and 915 Ferry were. Oh, how'd I do that?
William Golf.
I went backwards. I'm going the wrong way here. Hold on. There we go. Down the bottom. Okay. So all 3 of those properties were involved in fire. They're 2,000 square feet with basements. And NFPA states for initial full alarm assignment for a structure with 2,000 square feet, 2-story, these were 3, single family with no exposures, these are row homes, that we should have a minimum of 16 to 17 people on duty. So that reason is because of all the things that have to take place at the same time. So they're connecting to a hydrant, they're stretching hose lines. A lot of things take place that you might not realize, but it is a coordinated effort. And you'll see here in the fire. So what took place is when they showed up, they were doing those initial tasks. And if you can see down here in the bottom, a single hose line, that was our extra guy right there. He stretched all that around the back through the baker's alley. But what took place is the guys that were out in front, someone came up to them and told them there was someone trapped in one of these buildings. At that point, they stopped stretching hose lines. They got to go in and search. So with the type of construction, 1900, it's balloon frame, there are no firewalls, it's just plaster and lath between the buildings. And an unfortunate occurrence is in the west ward, the wind usually blows from west to east. We had some pretty warm temperatures, no humidity, and the wind was blowing east to west at the end of the block where this thing started. So, moving forward, you're going to see some of the pictures here with the overview. Come on. Yeah, I can't see the arrow on mine. Oh, okay. So as you can see, this thing's going to go down the entire block on us. And that's with hundreds of firefighters with mutual aid. We had people front, back, sides. It was just bad. So a multi-agency resource center, or what we call the MARC, it's community-centric, reflective of the conditions for the disaster of the event. This was fairly big. There were 60 people that were displaced. You try to expedite recovery for those individuals that are involved, and provide efficient and effective assistance throughout. Try to minimize the time and travel distance, so they were scattered all over the place. So we selected the Paxinosa School for our site. It's close to the West Ward, but unfortunately the Red Cross put them up in hotels. They were literally all over. We also try to make it a site that it was ADA compliant in case there were any handicapped individuals. So, how it works. Disaster survivors are greeted at the door. There's tables throughout with all the individual agencies. And I'll show you the list of agencies that were there. They're greeted, they come in, we find out what they need when they sign in. And then we direct them to those particular tables, depending upon their needs. So, for these particular events, you have the Agency on Aging, Agriculture, the Attorney General in case there's any fraud or scams, any health documents that need to be replaced, birth certificates, anything along those lines, benefit replacement, disability, all those types of things through Human Services, insurance companies to explain their coverages, the next steps for these people to follow, because they've lost everything. They might not have access to their policy numbers or their limits or any of that. So, and then we have PIMA that comes in with the recovery information, educational materials, a person that they can reach out to if there are issues. And that's especially true with the flooding issues we've had in the past. Revenue for taxes, transportation for driver's license or vehicle registrations. I know a lot of people lost their car keys as well. And then, of course, the Red Cross was there. They were an integral part of all of that. No, I'll show you the list at the end, and you'll see how many people were there.
On that previous list, I only saw one agency there that I related to the county, Human Services.
Area agents.
Is that it?
Yeah.
This seems like the county should have more in that aspect. I mean, I know they do stuff for,
The Veterans Affairs is theirs.
is what?
The Veterans Affairs.
Yeah.
Oh, is that?
Yeah,
There was a handful there. There were also a couple representatives there from the state, from their agency on human services and the VA. So,
No, I think this is great. I do, but my experience with the fire was that there was a lot of response from the public, and I didn't see that in here. You know, how do we coordinate?
I will, at the end, I will.
Okay.
We're going to get better. That I can assure you. So the Multi-Agency Resource Center is to bring everybody together. So they're not chasing. They don't have to go to one of the county buildings to find this, or go to PennDOT to get a license. So the idea is to bring everybody together, get all the victims together, and start that process as a unit. I believe so, yes. This was, yes. But I'm going to cover why it was later. So that responsibility is fully mine to bear, but I will get to that. So the MARC services, assistance for locating temporary housing, information on casework, health and mental health services, distribution of bulk supplies and gift cards or money that was passed out. As Dr. Rugos and the mayor both know, they were there. And location that serves as a meeting place for everybody to get together. So, participating organizations, we had the Red Cross, St. John's Lutheran Church, Third Street Alliance, United Way Project of Easton, Community Action Second Harvest, the Greater Easton Development Partnership, Northampton County EMA, Pennsylvania Emergency Management, and of course, the city.
Chief, just for reference, not that it matters now, Greater Shiloh Church was involved in there as well.
Okay.
So just so you know. So,
my apologies.
No, it's not a problem. It's not. But going forward, when you're looking for partners, reach out to them as well because they'll be willing to help again.
Yes. So
They were the resource center.
Shiloh, we set up there the night the fire started.
No. The MARC is specifically what took place at the school, not at the fire ground.
No, absolutely.
So this is the follow-up.
Correct. What I'm saying is we had issues because a lot of people didn't know all the resources Shiloh compiled because they weren't in the loop to get over to the school. So I'm saying going forward, just add them to the list.
Yeah.
So
We can.
Yeah. We had 2 shipping containers filled, but we missed everything over there. We didn't know about it. So.
Right.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
so, and we'll get to the responsibility and how they got left out of the process.
Right.
So as we know, the fire occurred on Memorial Day. The MARC wasn't established until June 10th or 11th, which is 12 days post-incident. The MARC typically is established much sooner for those in need. Better communications are needed to reduce confusion. Everybody's trying to help duplicate efforts, and it becomes a quagmire. Now, while everybody was, their best interested was in helping, there's a lot of confusion that goes along with that. So the coordination with having the MARC will eliminate some of that. As far as the emergency management coordinator, I believe that should be a full-time dedicated position to actually be effective, because as I'm standing on the fire ground, my last thought is changing hats to be the emergency management coordinator. This incident was escalating. I was out there on the fire ground till well after midnight. Came in the next day. We have to get the fire investigation process started. There's a lot of working and moving parts. So as I'm on the fire ground, I can't stop and switch hats. It's virtually impossible for me to do that. So that is some of the reasons that we had some issues. So we've learned a lot from that particular incident. There's always a learning curve with anything that happens. Fortunately for myself, Tommy Guth, Southside resident, works for Northampton County Emergency Management. He reached out to me and walked me through the process to get this all started. And William Slaughter from the Lehigh Valley Red Cross was instrumental as well. And we do participate in the monthly meetings for the Lehigh Valley Disaster Workshop. It's usually an online thing that we get together and cover topics that are crucial to what's going on in Lehigh Valley. So, just to let you know, as the emergency management coordinator for the city, there's a lot of training involved. So, that slide didn't really come out very well, but that list right there that you see, and I don't know if I can minimize this. Anyway, can I minimize this somehow?
We have it all on the screen.
Huh?
We're good on the screen. We see
Yeah,
it all.
there's stuff that.
Oh, there's more that's underneath.
Yeah. So. Oh, there we go. Yep. So, well, that reduces a little more. So, I'm mandated to attend at least 2 in-services a year. Usually they have quarterly meetings. I try to attend all 4 of them. As the emergency management coordinator, this list is the classes that I must take to be the coordinator. As you can see on the side, and this slide really doesn't bode well on here, but each class has a specified number of hours. If you look down there at total in the bottom right-hand corner in red, there's 71 hours that are committed to just the classes. Now, depending upon the availability of the class, some are virtual, so I can take them online. There are several that I actually have to travel to take them in person. The most recent one was the G191, was the ICS EOC interface. That was classroom. It was in Philadelphia, and it was on the night of the presidential debate. So there's travel time back and forth, the breakneck speed to get through traffic. It was a nightmare. But yeah, I was stuck down there. I would have never made it back. So it's just bad. But so there's local EOCs that I have to go visit in order to meet that. So there's one in Hamburg. I might have to go out to Harrisburg. And depending upon where these in-person classes are, I may have to drive to Pittsburgh because I have to attend these classes. So if they don't offer them often, I have to take them when I can.
So what happened was, because of the short tenure of our prior fire chief, Mike Krill, the opportunity that Henry had to take all these courses as a deputy chief was just not there. It would just happen quickly. Typically, you would have a lot more time, and the DC could get trained on all of this, but it didn't. It moved quickly. So part of that quick transition slowed this process down. So we're just trying to analyze what happened. So I just want to make sure I make that point a little bit clearer.
But
go ahead.
At the end of the day, the responsibility is mine, and I didn't do well. But again, it's a learning experience. We are going to be better prepared for the unfortunate next incident.
Is there any possibility of having multiple communities join together and have a singular emergency management coordinator?
The city of Easton cannot afford an emergency coordinator position for a fire that occurs, a tragic fire that occurs once every 10 years.
It's not just for fires, though, Mayor. It's
No, I
for
know, flood.
flooding. So
that's why when I was here in the 80s, it was not the police chief or the fire chief. It was it was a public works person. Because back then all we had were floods.
Right. Yeah. But so for us, if we were to look at that position, they can write grants for the flooding. There's a lot of things that they can do besides the on-scene things. So behind the scenes, they can do a lot of the grant writing to the federal government for all the flooding. It's very intricate, but
you coordinate a lot with the county too, right?
Yes.
Well, let's just hear the issue, then we can debate that later. But why don't you go through? Keep going.
Well, so like I was saying, if I'm on a fire, I can't stop what I'm doing there to turn around to be emergency management. If there's a shooting or something that we're going to be involved in, active shooter at a school, another incident that I'm not going to be able to step away from to do the emergency management side of things, I'm tied up on these events. I can't do 2 things. It's impossible. And I don't think you'd want me to try to attempt to do 2 things because things are going to fall through the cracks.
All right. Duly noted.
All right. Let's do the...
That was the end. Don't you have a more uplifting ending there? That was your ending?
No, the uplifting ending was we're going to do better.
Okay. All right. Good.
That was the uplifting ending.
All right.
All right. So...
That's a real nice fire engine, by the way.
That is a nice one.
Is that a new truck?
Yeah, just so I can bring you all up to speed, they've started to build our tiller. So as I get the pictures coming in, I will send them out for everybody to look at. Right now, it's just steel, and you barely see the CAD. But as we go through, I will send those updates out for all of you to view. So obviously, our latest engine. All right, so the problem we have are the electric vehicle charging stations. I'll just cut to the chase. It's my recommendation, we do not put them in the parking garages. Find a street lot or streets to put those on. And I'm gonna, if this works. Maybe it won't. Maybe it won't.
You need to hold control.
Yeah, I'm holding it. I just don't know if it's gonna do it.
Madison's coming back up.
Madison, take this.
Heads up on
Wow.
Control click.
He's getting good exercise.
Oh,
All we need is we need Dave to come back. No, when I do it on my computer, it just says control and click it, and it opens up.
Well, this is not your computer.
Oh, well, thanks. I know now that I brought mine up.
you guys have more modern computers up at the fire department.
It was an incident that happened when a Tesla was launching a jet ski in a program. And while doing research for this incident, I found two other incidents that happened the same way. Now, I'm always a little bit skeptical when I see these videos claiming to be EV failures that circulate around the internet. So I did some digging, and it turns out this one actually was an EV. This was a Model X that was backing a jet ski into the water. Unfortunately, something failed. That Model X rolled into the water, submerging itself completely. It ended up failing. The battery went in the thermal runaway under the water. And what you're seeing here is the battery's off-gassing a lot of flammable gases. Those gases are burning above the water. Now, the battery's probably burning under the water as well because, again, these batteries don't need oxygen from the outside atmosphere to burn. Now, this happened at the...
I'm just going to stop it there. That's just a general overview to show you what we're going to be up against when it comes to electric vehicles and these lithium-ion batteries. Huh?
No, one more. Yep. There you go.
Okay. So, the reasons electric vehicles catch on fire. Thermal runaway is the biggest one without a doubt. Battery damage. So if you're not aware, these vehicles, the battery packs, the vehicles sit lower to the ground than your regular internal combustion engine. They usually start from the rear of the front tire and go to the front of the rear tire, and it's the entire width of the car. So if you're driving down the road, and we know Pennsylvania has a lot of road construction, you can have a what's called a shock incident, where you don't actually puncture the battery pack, but from hitting that pothole could damage the interior portion of the battery. You're not going to recognize that right away, but when you start charging it, that's when it starts to get you. So overheating during charging, defects in manufacturing, fast charging, and exposure, as you saw there, to salt water, or driving through standing water. You know how we have people driving around the horses during flooding. It's just bad. So considerations: location of the vehicle, what floor is it on, what's next to the vehicle. So if this thing hits thermal runaway and there's cars parked on both sides of it, more than likely they're going to be involved as well. Your time of day, staffing levels and resources to fight the fire. Technology always outpaces the fire department. And when I'll show, and not to pick on Mr. Mulligan, I know he was just doing his thing there, but we have a vertical lumber yard over here. Podium construction. So industries, and not just, I'm not pointing a finger at any one industry, but generally they don't consult the fire department before they do things. So you have the vertical lumber yard over here, podium construction, first two floors masonry or steel, and then it's all wood. Lightweight truss construction has been a killer of firefighters. The furniture you put in these houses, so back in the younger years, so I know the mayor and I had this conversation, legacy furniture was made of natural fibers, that stuff would not burn. You could set a room on fire, it'd take a half hour before it got to the point where it flashed over. Nowadays, with this type of furniture here, it's all the petroleum-based products. You could go to flash over 3-4 minutes in a room. So by the time we get there, this thing is already out of control. So that's why I say they create problems for our solutions. Tow vehicles to remove the burning vehicle. Height-wise, I don't know if they're going to fit in here, the rollbacks, whatever we're going to need to get it out of there. Damage to the parking structure is going to be huge. Vehicle weight. These vehicles are 20 to 30% heavier than a regular internal combustion engine. Concrete spalls at 212 degrees. EVs burn at more than 5,000 degrees. Because this incident is going to involve a lot of hazardous materials, at the end I have a list of all the things that we know are in there. There could be some unknowns. Basically, we're going to end up shutting everything down. I'll show you that when I get to the maps. In the near future, this generation of electric vehicles that are on the road now are going to have their batteries replaced. That's going to cost the owner between $7,000 and $30,000, depending on the size or the manufacturer of that battery. What you can count on is people trying to save money and going to a knockoff battery. That's where we have the problem, because there's no industry standard on how they're manufactured. So unless you get an original battery from that manufacturer, you're kind of against the wall. Electric vehicle battery lifespan is 8 to 12 years or 200,000 miles. Funding. The city's self-insured, so if one of these things cooks off in your parking structures, we're going to have to figure out how to fund that. Loss of revenue, because the structure is going to be torn down or have to be repaired, you're losing all your parking revenue because you're not going to be able to park in the parking garage itself. Environmental considerations, I'll cover that in a little bit when you see that list. And evacuations are going to be driven by our emergency response guide, but it's going to be 330 feet in all directions. And here's the map. So, if there's a fire in this garage, from Ferry to Washington, from 4th to Sitgraves, anything in that area has got to be evacuated. City Hall, you guys are all going. You're effectively shutting down your bus depot. We have no means to figure out where we're going to send those. Anybody that's parked in this parking garage is going to be held hostage because of what we're going to have to do. We can't get our trucks up to the upper floors, so we're going to have to drag hose up the ramps, up the staircases. No one is going to move their cars in or out of here. They are stuck. Their vehicle is stuck here until our operation is done. As I said at the beginning, it's going to be a hazardous materials incident because of everything that's contained in these batteries. If it's the new parking garage, you got to move your police department. They're in that circle. I don't know if they have an alternate spot to operate out of, but you're also moving the school and all those businesses. So from Spring Garden down to Northampton Street and from West Street over to North 3rd is effectively shut down. So either incident, you're basically shutting down downtown.
Chief,
yes.
Quick question, I'm sorry, not that it makes a difference. When you talk about taking the hoses up the steps, don't we have the water pipe that we connect at the bottom and then?
Yes, we have.
Not that it makes a difference,
yes,
but
we have standpipes.
Okay.
But you're only going to get a certain amount of water out of there.
Okay.
The water that it's going to take to put these things out, and that's after the thermal runaway is done. You're not going to put the fire out when it's a thermal runaway. Your best hope is to contain it in place. But when that's all over and done with, hopefully we'll get it extinguished. So your charging stations, level 1 is usually residential, around $900 in cost. Installation could be $1,000 or more. That's typically for your homeowners. Level 2 is public, the cost for the charger itself is about $3,500. For the fast chargers, $38,000 to $90,000, depending upon which one you get. That's 240 volts, 14 hours to fully charge, 208 volts for your outlets for the commercial use. The level 3, they're also fast charging between $6,000 and $120,000. But the level 3s don't necessarily charge all the electric vehicles. They're for certain ones. So, moving on. Cost of the infrastructure upgrades. So we have class 1 standpipe back here. We'd have to upgrade that to class 2. We're probably going to need a retention pond for all the fluid that's going to be running off. We're going to have to shut all the, or close down all the street drains so it doesn't get into your rivers. So the associated cost for installing the charging station, who actually funds that? Is it the people that are going to be charging their cars? How does that all look in the end? Your risk-benefit analysis with the revenue you're going to lose and where to park these vehicles if an incident happens in your parking garage is going to be huge. So if I'm correct in my numbers, and I don't know if I am, it's $15 million for that one, $24 million for this one.
24 million included City Hall.
City Hall, yeah.
Which is
both.
Yeah. Okay. But as you can see, you're jeopardizing a lot of infrastructure for the few electric vehicles. I know we're looking future, but we'll cover that in a minute. So if there's a fire here with one of those, we're going to have to shut down the structure. No one's coming in, no one's going out. It's hazardous material incident. You saw the 2 circles if we have one in either of the garages. Traffic around downtown is going to be gridlocked. Attacking the fire is going to take time. We're going to have to hook up to the standpipe. Everybody's going to have to be fully dressed in their turnout gear and SCBA in place before they make it up to where the smoke and the fire actually is. That's going to take a little bit of time. Thermal runaway, like I said earlier, we're not going to be able to put this thing out when it's in thermal runaway. Our best outcome is to contain it in place, and hopefully it doesn't do collateral damage to any exposures. Your temperatures, like I said, is 5,000 degrees with an electric vehicle. That's going to do some damage to your concrete. It's going to be a prolonged operation, and it's going to be manpower intensive. So not only are we shutting down the streets, but you're going to have all the mutual aid fire companies coming in here so we can get water to that and get people switched out to actually fight the fire. So the staffing and resources, when you have to combine 2 or more companies, you're really taking a hit there. The proper procedures is very in-depth, but as you've heard, it's going to be a lot. I appreciate you guys taking the opportunity to let me come down here and talk to you about all this. Now it's time for some of the numbers. As of December 31st of 2023, there were 70,154 electric vehicles registered in the entire Commonwealth, out of a total of 11,800,712 cars. 168 to 1 difference. I won't do that next one there, but so if you decide to install charging stations, my professional opinion, based on all these facts, that we do it on a surface street or in a surface lot, because we're adding unnecessary risk to your investments, and there's almost no return out of that. So this next slide here, this is all the compounds. There are links to Wikipedia, but what I did is transfer that to, let me go out to here. This is going to be the known toxins that are in the smoke. So, and there's quite a list of them. So let me get that thing out of the way.
These are gases. They wouldn't be in the water then.
Not in the water, but
I mean, you said the runoff you'd have to collect, but
yes,
these are gases.
Yeah, they're gases, but the minerals that are in the batteries, as they pull apart, all the stuff that's in a vehicle, that's going to run downhill and downstream. So,
But that's in addition to this.
yes. So this is another addition. But the reason I point this list of toxic gases out to you is we are going to do a gross decon on scene with the hazmat team. So they're going to scrub everybody down that's there. All of our equipment is going to have to be sent out to be professionally cleaned. So as you can see on that list, there's 22 different issues that we'll run into just in the smoke that's produced from the batteries. And that's pretty much the Cliff Note version. Dr. Rugos was gracious to sit through an hour of this last Monday, not yesterday, but the previous Monday, as we went over all of this.
So, Chief, you're not in favor of putting them in the garage?
No, I don't think I don't think it's a wise investment on our part as a city, just for the damage that could happen.
Yeah, after hearing that, I'm not in favor of it either.
No, me either.
So if we find an area, maybe up by the courthouse, that's got a surface lot, that would be your ideal situation.
No, well, where we have some opportunity, I think, is in this 3rd Street lot here next to Mesa, but along the back of the property where it's next to the post office.
So let me ask.
But I wouldn't. No, but it's along the post office. Yeah.
But let me ask Louis to that. I'm sorry.
Also on the street.
Yeah, but the question is, if from what we just heard, you still have to evacuate City Hall and everywhere else. So wouldn't it make sense to put it somewhere farther out a little more? Just
Yeah, it would make sense. I think you're right. Here's the only problem, guys. I mean, we need to compete as a city, and unfortunately, like all of the modern cities that are competing to bring in this technology and to bring in these individuals who are going to consume a lot and pay a lot in our downtown have E type of vehicles. And it attracts these types of individuals. So what do we do?
We're so dense that we don't have that space.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, and obviously over here is better than the parking garage, but I mean, it won't hinder the firefighters as much as it would from the parking garage, but all the shutting down the downtown and having to move out to City Hall, that's still going to be right there.
No, I know.
So,
I mean, there has to be.
We have doctors' offices, restaurant, everybody would have to be evacuated.
The
apartments across the street.
You get an old aircraft carrier, put them on a float on the Delaware River, have them plug in, and if you get the fire, just float them out.
You know what we could do? We could actually look at a map and sit down with the chief and point out what areas will be less disruptive.
I'd like to see what the risk is.
Can't eliminate
And
risk.
you know what is the risk? Because I mean, we have buses that pull in downstairs that are powered by propane. What if the propane tank blows up when it's in the garage? We lose the garage. I mean, there are lots of things that come into the garage, and there's going to be electric vehicles coming into the garage that aren't charging. I mean, and you said, you know, if they hit a bump or something like that, it could, you know, do damage to the battery, and the battery could catch on fire. I mean, we could have a fire in there with electric vehicles without having a charging station. What you were saying, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, what is the risk? I mean, we always have risk in whatever we
You can't
do.
eliminate risk. All you can do is manage it.
Well, let me ask a question. If a vehicle catches on, we have a lithium battery that has exploded and it's on fire and it's in the garage, you put the radius, etc. Everything has to be closed down because the building is compromised, right? But what if this was on 4th Street? What if we had a charging station on 4th Street? Are the buildings around it equally as compromised? Because now it's external. It's not an internal part of it.
5,000 degrees.
Yeah, 5,000 degrees, so you're going to damage your street. There's no doubt.
No, I know that.
But with the smoke, because of the emergency response guide, that dictates how far we have to move people away.
The other thing I would critique here is that we don't know what the industry is going to do. So I think regulations will hopefully come into play. But when you're looking,
Well, the regulations have already come into play. There's a number of cities who do not allow vehicles stored inside their building if there's lithium batteries. New York is one of them.
Yeah.
So what they have is a lot of the apartments. Like, I don't know where you keep your bike,
There you go.
but
I do now.
a lot of people know when he's home. A lot of people.
I have a detached garage. It was
okay.
built in the 1930s.
But your garage will go up.
And you still have to.
I saw when the fire commissioner from New York, made the presentation at one of our National League of Cities conventions. They showed a video of a electric bike. Person brings it into their apartment, puts it down, puts it on a charger, and boom, it goes up in less than 30 seconds. You have a major fire, and most kids keep it by their door because they bring it in, they put it by. So now they can't even get out of their apartment.
Yeah.
And you said that you had one on Bushkill Drive that was just like a battery pack, right?
Yes. So whatever the individual threw away was a small cell of lithium-ion batteries. They threw it in the garbage. When the garbage truck compressed it, started the entire truck on fire.
Oh, geez.
We actually dumped the entire load of trash in the street to put it out, separated everything out, and these were maybe 8 AA size batteries.
Wow.
That
And what
did
I'm saying
that
is,
much damage.
I think when we look at this after this presentation, we got to look at updating our codes and
I was
making it
gonna say,
illegal.
yeah.
But I
Make it illegal to throw lithium batteries in trash and store inside.
Yeah,
my
you
point.
went 360 on this.
Well,
No, I didn't go 360 on this. I still want electric charging stations. I just don't want them in vehicles.
yeah.
But I think to
Right.
the mayor's
Well, I mean-
point and to Councilman Ruggles, we can't eliminate it. You got to manage it. And I think one of the ways
Right.
to manage it is not putting it in such a important area like the downtown
Can't
or the,
say
we got to move
can't
it
say
somewhere
we're not going to put them in the garage and have the electric vehicle stored in the sally port of the police station. Carl can't store it there anymore. I mean, we should have a policy. You can't store any lithium battery functions in the indoors.
Well, they're bikes too.
They're the bikes.
They're bikes. They're,
All right.
Yep.
All right.
But-
all right.
but I mean,
And there's more and more of those bikes.
right. But I mean, I think the mayor is correct in that, we really need to take a look at our ordinances because I know for a fact, and you do too, that Lafayette has charging stations in their new parking deck.
Yep.
And, I don't know what they have planned
Used to.
over here, but I will bet you that they have charging stations in there because probably their tenants would
Want it?
want it, and so they're going to have charging stations in there. And, again, how do we manage that as a council, I don't know. I mean, and I think the other thing that is really challenging is right now it's not, as you said, it's 1 in 168, right? 168, 1 in 168 cars. What happens when it becomes 1 in 2 or 1 in even 10? Okay, there's going to be the demand for charging stations everywhere, and
I know.
how does that work? We got a total garage over here that has no charging stations in it, and we're wanting people to park it.
Well, I think I think the chief hit the nail on the head. As these vehicles are sold from the original owner, and it's already happening, there's going to be this underground market that's producing non-regulated
Knockoff
potentially-
Oh,
batteries.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I understand the issue, but I again, what is the risk? I mean, yeah, occasionally these catch on fire. Occasionally, a gasoline, they don't burn 5,000 degrees, but occasionally cars catch on fire.
About 1,500 degrees.
But
internal combustion.
I mean, that's not. I would not think that car catching on fire is probably more, combustion engine car catching on fire is more probable than electrical car catching on fire.
It is, but fortunately, in that respect, with an internal combustion engine, that's one we can put out.
Mhm.
When these things hit thermal runaway, we have to let it do its thing
Just let it
until
go, yeah.
burns it out.
Mhm.
So you have that duration, whatever that period is.
Yeah,
It's
the
bad.
Marquise is gonna have 4 EV charging stations.
Right in the middle of the building.
Right.
Well, it's not a
That's
bad,
your problem.
it's not a bad idea to ask them if they've evaluated the risk themselves. You know, because they have to have their insurance and everything else. I mean, I would be curious. It may well be that, you know, we're overreacting. I don't know. There.
Well, I don't think, is that what we do? I mean, that might be an option for us. We put charging stations in the garage and we buy an insurance policy.
Yeah, the one that has the exception for electric battery blowups.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
only a matter of time before the insurance companies exclude them.
Yeah. That's.
'Cause they manage their risk by zero risk.
They've excluded all environmental risk. I mean, you can't get a landlord-tenant policy that doesn't have that exclusion. I don't know, but it would be interesting. I'm serious to ask someone like City Center who has a lot of apartments and have they looked at this? Have they evaluated the risk? And they may say, well, yeah, you can do it, but this is what you should be doing to mitigate the risk. You know, there's a lot more probably to be
Well, I
studied.
think our building code should have it as well.
All right, well, it's to be continued, but obviously right now it's good discussion.
A bicycle lithium battery is just as powerful just as dangerous in an apartment as a car lithium battery is in the garage.
Well,
And like you say, right by the door.
actually, the bicycle in a building is way worse than a car in a garage.
Yeah,
It's because you have that life hazard.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that Lewis can no longer drive his bike
But I mean,
to City
yeah.
Hall.
Oh, no, you
bike-
can't, you
my
can't.
bike is next to my lawnmower.
That's not on the agenda. You
work.
can't make that motion.
Just so you're aware, we've addressed that,
With
and
Lewis?
it's in the caged area behind Ballard.
Okay. Thank you.
Him and Trevor.
It was right next to your desk.
Trevor asked me, I said, hey, Trevor.
Marty, my wall! My wall!
I gave Trevor a key, and Trevor said, Lewis, why are you doing this? I was like, don't worry, I have one too. It was the last day I rode my bike to work.
But
That's
the whole idea of the lithium ion batteries, and I mean, like you said, you can get them in double A's, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, when they catch on fire, they're still gonna be at 5,000 degrees, you know? And when they're at 5,000 degrees, anything around them that's combustible
it's going.
It's going.
is up. I mean, it's burning.
Yep.
And you know, and that's the thing is that if we had, you know, just walking on the Bushkill Trail, the number of bicycles that go by me that are electric bikes, the number of skateboards or whatever you call them that go by me that are powered, electrical powered. I mean, it's incredible, and I mean, how many of these are in people's houses, you know, and they just, I'm just recharging the battery, you know.
Remember the hoverboards a couple years ago for Christmas?
The
And people's apartments started going up.
They were
in
made
flames?
by knockoff companies out of China.
Yes. So, just so you're aware, right here, laptops. You'll find that students, college students especially, plant these things on their beds. They fall asleep. The battery overheats, sets the bedding on fire.
Yep.
You're off to
The
the
fan
races.
can work. Fan is thrown by hot air.
Can't tell you how many
So
times I
your
did
cell
that.
phones, same thing. But in the manufactured, to correct the batteries, they have a manufacturing process that doesn't allow the battery to get to full charge. And when it does get to full charge, it stops charging it altogether. But
But the knockoffs don't.
the knockoffs do not, because we don't have that regulation yet. So I'm not telling you not to do charging stations. I'm just telling you it's a bad idea to do it in your parking structures.
All right.
That's,
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
and if
Thank
guys-
you.
like I said, if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to sit down with you. I can show you some horrific videos of these things cooking off.
All right. You want to shut the project down?
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Okay, so,
Okay.
Well, the good, the, good-